This is the Behavioral Divide, brought to you by Avantis Investors, where we bring together both academic research and real-world financial advice to uncover insights that may help us make better financial decisions. I am Jeremy Thornton with Avantis Investors, here with our host and great friend, Professor Hal Hershfield. Today we're talking about financial literacy, episode 8. We've got some really fantastic guests today. Why don't you talk to us a little about who's joining you today?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Jeremy. So we've got the world's experts today. So we've got Dr. Annamaria Lusardi. She's a professor of finance at Stanford University, and she's also the director of the Initiative for Financial Decision Making. And then on the advisor side, we have Tom Koch, who's a partner and regional director at Apella Wealth. And also, he hosts this radio program and podcast specializing in financial education and literacy. And, you know, the conversation's really amazing between them because you've got these two minds who have done so much work on this topic. And to me, there's a couple big takeaways, but one of my favorite ones is from Dr. Lusardi, who said financial literacy and financial advice are not substitutes, but they're complements. So that, you know, the people who are most literate are also the ones who recognize that they could have some help and get that help. And then Tom seemed to echo that and say, you know, the clients who that they can help the most aren't the ones who just assume that there's some black box there, but the ones who actually have some general knowledge of how things work. And you know, I think that general knowledge is an important one. It wasn't like he's saying they need to know every single in and out of every single decision that he and his partners are making, but echoing what Annamaria Lusardi was saying, it's got to be this kind of general knowledge of some of the basic concepts in finance. I just thought that was such a nice marriage of the practice side of the equation and the, you know, academic researcher side of the equation.
Right. Agree with that, Hal. And I think what really stuck with me were some of the statistics that Professor Lusardi mentions from the research. And it's really quite striking how low financial literacy rates are in the US and globally. But also really, really insightful was this idea that you mentioned that, you know, financial literacy is not a substitute for financial advice. They're really complements to one another. And so that if we can do a good job of improving financial literacy, it not only helps society, but it can also be good for financial advice as an industry and as a business. So I thought that was really, really quite interesting as well.
Awesome. All right, let's do it.
All right, let's get to the episode.
Anna, Tom, thank you so much for being here today. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I think it's a topic that deserves more attention and a topic that applies across the income spectrum. I'm really excited to hear what you both have to say about this. So, Anna, I'm going to kick it off with you first because you've done some of the foundational research on financial literacy. This isn't meant to be a comment on my age or your age, but I feel like I've been reading and citing you for a very long time now. So thank you for all your work. So maybe we can just level set here. Can you define what you mean, what researchers mean by financial literacy, and how have you and other researchers measured it?
First of all, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. It's great to be here. It's great to have this conversation about financial literacy. And yes, I feel I have been working on this for 30 years now. So, but it's exciting. Once you start working on financial literacy, you cannot do anything else. So I love these questions about measurement or how you define it, because it is indeed very important. You know, what do we mean with financial literacy? And I'm going to use two definitions. One, a short one, which has been also at the basis of some of the work we have done, and then a more formal one, which is the one adopted by the OECD, which also led to a lot of important measurements. So I would define financial literacy as simply the knowledge and the ability to use the fundamental concept of finance to make financial decisions. So what we mean by financial literacy, and as the word says, is really the knowledge of the fundamental concept, the ABC of personal finance. And this, for example, has led us and I mean Olivia Mitchell and I, who have been very long collaborators on this topic, to define the big three. These are three questions that we have designed to measure financial literacy. And if you look at them, they are measuring the most basic concepts. But I also want to give you a more formal and longer definition. And this is what we did and we designed with the OECD, because back in 2012, the OECD also set out to measure financial literacy among 15 years old, because they thought this is a fundamental concept that young people need to have. Now, I know it's a long one, so I want to read it also because I don't remember it myself, but it says that financial literacy is knowledge and understanding of financial concepts and risks, and the skills, motivation, and confidence to apply such knowledge and understanding in order to make effective decisions across a range of financial contexts to improve the financial well-being in society and to enable participation in economic life. I love these definitions because it shows that financial literacy has an objective, which is to make good financial decisions and eventually to participate to society. We designed 40 questions in order to measure financial literacy among 15 years old. But I think this definition and this measurement have really been important to understand where we are when we talk about financial literacy, and also what we can do to improve financial literacy.
This is great because I think part of what I hear you talking about is not only the knowledge, but also the application of some of the fundamental and basic, financial concepts there. And we'll get into later. Maybe you can even quiz us, or maybe we shouldn't do that. We'll have to see how Tom and I do. But let me just ask, knowing that that's the formal definition, and I love that this is from work that you and Olivia Mitchell have done, plus the work that you've done with the OECD. Tom, I'm curious how the way that Anna has defined it maps onto the way that you've thought about it as a concept, the way that you've thought about financial literacy, and how this maps onto the way that you talk about it with your clients, as well as your clients' adult children, next generation, as well as the way that you talk about it in your financial education work, whether it's with the radio shows and podcasts and whatnot. I'd love to hear that.
Well, I'm just glad she's not asking us the 40 questions. I'm glad we're not starting there. This is a fascinating thing because we're in the business of giving advice, right? Our job is for you to become a client, for us to take care of your money, do the planning, do all that kind of thing. So I'm at this weird intersection of talking to the general public, but at the same time, through the podcast and the show, and then at the same time talking to our clients. So, but I think for us, and I hope this is becoming more universal in the business, that it's the attitude of the firm to educate. In other words, if you come to us, we're not just going to say there's a black box here and you don't need to know about how this is all a very big trick. We're going to say you need to know these basic concepts. Maybe it's 40 questions. I'm hoping it's just the 3. But a part 2 of that is then we're going to say the other person in the life, because generally people that we get to know, there's one person who's kind of the money person in a relationship. The other one's going to drag along, and as long as I can write a check or do whatever with my money, I'm okay. They don't want to get it, but we work hard on making sure they get it as well. And then you mentioned something very important, Hal. That is families, because we not just work for families, but we educate families. And we do that through the aforementioned podcast. We do classes. We have one-on-one sessions with young people to say, okay, you're 23, you just started your first job. Here's how much you should be saving. Here's how to save it. Here are the things to consider. So that's the advice part, and that's not necessarily the literacy. I think, again, most of this begins in the family. I'll give you a quick look at my family. My dad was a doctor, my mom highly educated. These are not people that wanted to talk about money at the family dinner table. No way that's going to happen. But my mom gave me a couple of basic, like, for example, I can say, and I still do it. She used to say, when you go shopping, have a general idea of how much that was $10, this 20. So you're kind of running that in your head. And these general things, and that's what I love about literacy. These are general topics, right? They're not specific advice, knowledge that everybody has to have. So that kind of got me thinking about numbers in a way that I don't know that I ever would. But so I think it does start at the family level. For us, though, the firm is based in this education that people really should understand this. We're going to advise you because we do this every day, but these are the things you really should know about your money.
Okay, so I like this idea that it's starting with the family. And I think there's a sort of a connection here between the way that you've described it, Anna, and then the way that you're talking about it, Tom, in terms of it being sort of general knowledge, right? But then, of course, at the end of the day, it has to be applied somewhere. Actually, let me ask this, Anna, where are we at in terms of a country, the US, that is, how do we compare to the rest of the world in terms of financial literacy and these concepts? And then maybe you could talk a little bit about what it impacts. I know that you had a recent paper that looked at this in a longitudinal way, which is, the academic term, of course, for looking at a concept over time. So if you could talk a little bit about that, where are we at as a nation, and what do some of these concepts and the knowledge of these general concepts have an impact on?
So statistics are not good. So when we look at the at financial literacy, and in particular measure with the 3 questions, and so when we look even at the knowledge of the most basic questions, the ABC of personal finance, unfortunately, in the US, not even half of the population knows these basic concepts. So, the level of financial literacy is very low. And I have to say, it's true also across the world. So if we look at the G7 countries, if we look at the G20 countries, we see similar level of low financial literacy. And frankly, it's not surprising because, we have not added this topic, for example, in school or in school curricula. So people have to learn by themselves, in a sense. And, it's not that you learn this just by watching the world around you. And not only I say that financial literacy is low, but it is consequential. As you have mentioned, financial literacy has an impact on a variety of behaviors. So today we are asked to, take up student loans. If we are a young person going to college, we are asked to plan for retirement. We are asked to invest in the financial markets, confronting so many complex financial instruments. And what we see is that those with low financial literacy tend not to do well in a variety of financial decisions. So we see that people not only do not plan for retirement or don't invest in the stock market, but also they don't insure, they don't have precautionary savings. So a variety of things that, for example, we teach in our personal finance course, and are most importantly, and as the definition of the OECD was pointing to, this has consequences for behavior, for well-being, for your financial security, for your resilience.
And just to be clear, some of these questions, because we've been talking about the 3 questions, one of them, for instance, is something like you have $100 and it has a 2% return. After 5 years, is it worth more than $102, less than, or the same as $102, right? That's one of the questions, right?
It is one of the questions. So when we look at the big 3, and it was useful to design those questions because they measure the most basic concept. One is, can you do a 2% calculation in the context of interest rate, like the one you have mentioned? We looked about inflation and testing the knowledge of inflation in a very simple way, again, and also looking at risk and risk diversification. So these are the 3 fundamental concepts at the basis of almost every financial decisions. And then when we ask about this concept, we do see that people indeed do struggle, even with the ABC of personal finance. And I have to say, at the end, it's not so easy. Finance is not so easy, right? And so it's not that common sense or, our general knowledge is going to help us in this specific topic.
Okay, so I find it fascinating that the answers to these questions has an impact. I mean, I know that you've teased this apart, and we're not getting into this, but the looking at sort of the econometrics and teasing apart and saying it, there is a impact of the knowledge, the knowledge of these concepts on later behavior. And Tom, I'm curious where you see issues surrounding financial literacy arise, and maybe I want to talk about the elephant in the room. Do you see it across the income spectrum?
Yeah, I mean, what we see is two ways. People that are our clients, that this is a self-selection process, right? People that have decided to hire us because they have enough money, they need the help, they're close to retirement, et cetera, et cetera. People that do not have money either give up, or conversely, they do what we've seen a lot of this behavior, especially since 2020. They go onto TikTok, they go onto popular media places, and then they decide, well, I got to buy this meme stock, or I need to get into crypto. I got to do something that's going to move me from here to there, rather than, as the doctor just pointed out, knowing the basic concepts around interest, compounding interest. If I just set something aside, it grows, et cetera. So we run into a couple people that are either way over interested in this topic and make poor decisions because they're every day they wake up and the world's changed in some way, or people that give up. They just simply say it's the half of America, for example, that doesn't know the answers to these questions and doesn't invest anything, plans nothing for the future, has no emergency savings, and then finds himself at retirement in a horrible place where they're dependent basically just on Social Security, which is not a great way to live out the rest of your years. So yeah, we do see a divide between people that have money, but there are very wealthy people that still make bad mistakes because they get caught up in what's going on day to day, and they need to learn to build the right, as the doctor points out, diversified portfolio, and learn to leave it alone. Doesn't matter all the stuff happening, because that stuff's going to keep happening. Your portfolio should be about you and your future.
So the takeaway I'm hearing is that Anna needs to create her own TikTok channel to get
absolutely.
Okay.
I did sign up for that one tomorrow. You betcha.
Okay, but so I think what you're saying here is that, sure, you can see at the lower end of the income spectrum, but it also rears its head at the higher end, and in different ways. And on that note, have researchers primarily focused on lower income segments when they talk about financial literacy, or is there a world in which this applies to higher income segments as well? Or maybe I should say, how does it apply to higher income segments as well?
It applies to everyone.
Okay.
So we have looked at the whole population, and I have to say financial literacy is low across every income group. So do not expect, even though it goes up with income, do not expect that it is particularly high even among the high income group. And yet again, because this is relatively new concept, right? It's relatively new about how much we are also responsible for these financial decisions. But also the research, I think, is very important. When we have looked across the population, in addition to income, we have found that there are groups who are vulnerable when it comes to financial literacy, particularly because they have low level. And they are, for example, large group of the population. We find low financial literacy, for example, among women. So this is something that, is very important to me, for example, and I pay special attention to my female student, for example, is very low among the young. And that's important because for them, the world is going to be very different, and they are in charge of very important decisions, including their own student loan. And it's also low across other age group, for example, the older population. It could be a combination of decline of cognitive ability later in life. It could also be that, they weren't in charge of so many decisions in the past and so on. But I wouldn't just classify financial literacy across income groups. There are other important groups where financial literacy is low. But overall, I have to say, this really cuts across the population. And this is why I think it's important to make a very big effort to try to change those statistics.
And I'm going to agree with the doctor. Thank you, Dr. Lusardi, because this is spot on in my world, is that the sourcing becomes so important to all of this. You've done this great work. You're helping young people every day understand the basic things. The rest of the world is out here trying to sell everybody something, basically. At the end of the day, they got a pitch. They got whatever it is. If people had just the 3 questions understood at age 15 to 23, somewhere in there, and they had that knowledge, they knew that they needed to save something. They knew compound interest would work in their favor. They understand the relationship between compound interest and inflation, and they understand that, yes, being diversified is better than just owning one meme stock. If they had those basic concepts, they're going to be in a far better place. So I think this does come back to educating, and I think it starts in the family, as you mentioned, Hal, but also in the schools. This is where we've got to give people the basics so they can take care of themselves for the long term.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about this education, because I know other researchers have talked about, quote unquote, just in time education. And I know Anna, you and others have talked about, starting it early. And I have my own little kids, and I try to bring up some of these concepts, and then I worry, like, are they listening to anything I'm saying about anything? And so one of the things I am wondering here is, what are some of the tools? What are some of the resources? Let me start with you, Anna. What are some of the tools and resources that the research side has tried to leverage? And then Tom, I'd love for you to jump in and say, like, what have you done and used there?
So first of all, I want to echo what Tom said, which is I think it's critically important to start it in the school.
Okay.
And also because it is a way to reach everybody. So other instruments, other resources have the disadvantage that, it's very hard to reach everyone. And I think it's important to give access and to make this access available to everyone. So, and also you need to add this concept before people make financial decisions, not after. And so that's another reason why it is very important to have it in the schools. And a third reason why I would encourage you to continue to talk to your children about money is that socialization about this topic starts very, very early. I have interviewed a lot of famous people in finance who have become, CFO or CEO, and always they mention an experience about finance when they were children.
Mhm.
So I think overall it's so critically important. I think you will take away, if you talk to children about money, the fear, and you can foster the curiosity about it. The fact that at the end, money is a mean to achieve an objective, is an instrument, so you can do better. I think, and not only in school, but also in college. So at Stanford, we teach personal finance. It's one of the most popular course in economics, but we attract all of the students. There are no prerequisites. And it's, we have to raise the cap 5 times
Wow.
last year. And we have, when it started, 362 students sign up, including some professors and deans as well. Tell you that there is such a demand for these topics. And I know that now a lot of states are mandating financial education in school. And I think this is a very important, trend. I hope that all of the state will mandate financial education. And I always say the best time to talk about financial literacy is when the tooth fairy comes and give you some money.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's genius. I think, by the way, doctor, that the best time, so I have a teenage daughter who just got her first job. She gets these checks. She didn't know how much they're going to be. She had no idea about taxes, all this sort of thing. And I've been making her take 15%, set it aside in savings. You don't need to go to Land's End. I mean, for some of your money, you do. But these points of inflection, these are so, and removing, as you said, the mystery about money. Money is important. Well, none of us can do any. I just watched a series on Netflix where they went across the West and they had no money. I kept thinking, how do they get from here to California with nothing? Can't do that anymore today. But don't make money the middle of your life. It's a thing. It should be there. You got to take care of it, but do it in a way that you, as you said, you can explore the rest of your life successfully. So yeah, starting with young people, having education in the schools, absolutely. But removing that mystery inside of your own family. My family did not do that well. Smart people, but money was just a taboo topic. You don't talk about that at the dinner table. I think we all need to talk about it at the dinner table so that it doesn't become, as you said, a mystery, something that's hard to understand.
That's a great perspective. I mean, selfishly, I'm taking something away from this, but Tom, let me just ask you, how are you actually doing this in practice with not just with your daughter, but with your clients? How are you bringing up? What tools are you using? Is it more of a conversation that you sort of layer on top of the normal advice you're giving? I'm curious how this looks for you.
Yeah, so we do online classes that are just for young people. We do online classes and meet with clients about what we call disinterested spouse, specifically for people that don't want to know what a PE ratio is, but they need to make sure they're going to have enough money, their retirement's going to be successfully. So we specifically set out. And then our podcast is, again, designed the concepts are designed to be simple. Again, I think I used black box at the beginning. We don't tell people, you'll never understand this. We tell you, yeah, these are the kind of the general things everybody needs to understand. We don't want you spending every day on this, but you need to know these things. So we've just tried to demystify all that in a way, Hal, so that people feel comfortable with it and they can make good decisions.
That's great. Okay, final question for you both. So I'll start with you, Anna. Anything that you want Tom and other advisors to know from the research side? In other words, this would be a great opportunity to say, hey, here's something that we know that doesn't seem to have crossed over. And then I'll flip it around and ask you the same thing, Tom. So Anna, let me go with you first.
Tom is already aware of this, but I wanted to say that when it comes to financial literacy and financial advice, what the research indicates is that they are complements, not substitutes. So it is those who have high financial literacy who seek financial advice, and I say who probably use financial advice better. So improving financial literacy is a win-win for everybody, including financial advisors. And this is why I also think that, financial literacy is something that hopefully not just the education system, but also the financial system will embrace, because it will help everybody from the financial system to the retail investors and everybody else.
I love that perspective. Okay, Tom, let me flip it to you. You have a wealth of knowledge. And one thing that often happens is that on the academic side, we don't know about it. So what, anything you would want researchers like Anna and me to know from the practice side?
Yeah, I mean, that's an absolutely wonderful question. I brought it up at home. I asked people here in the office, and the answer I generally get is, okay, less than half of America can answer these 3 questions. Okay, less than half of America invests and really works on their future. But then people always want to turn to this question. Everybody wants to know about everything, and it's kind of the why. Why is that? Why do people struggle with all these things? Why don't they make time to at least have basic understanding of money? You've answered some, the doctors answered some of this today, right? But again, this would be something to drill down on so that the education process can make this interesting. There's people that are interested in money because they want to be rich. But generally people view money as that's something I have to deal with. How do we make this interesting enough so that basically everyone does this? And I'm totally in agreement with you, Dr. Lusardi. The better we can get everybody working on money, the better we're all going to be, frankly, because the more of us who save, who invest, who take care of ourselves in the long haul, that just makes the world a better place. So I think that's the question that the advisory community is kind of like the whys of all this. I know that you're working on that because you're talking to so many people, but that's the question that I think people here want to know the answer to.
I think that's such a deep point, right? This is going beyond just knowledge about finance and knowledge about application to a deeper question of money and what does it mean and what does it get us, and as a society. I think that's something that is a conversation that we should be having more. I love that. Okay, I'm gonna stop here. Dr. Annamaria Lusardi, Tom Cock, thank you guys so much. This is such a rich conversation. I think we could go on for hours, but I'll keep it short. Thank you again for your time today. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thank you.